Good morning. It is Friday, the 20th of March. I'm Maeve McMahon and you're watching Europe Today, your daily dose of European news and analysis, live here on Euronews. Coming up after hours and hours of talks, a tense EU summit in Brussels has come to an end. After over 12 or 13 hours of meetings inside the Europa building, leaders have called it a day. From a proposed loan to Ukraine to the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, their agenda was packed. But war-torn Ukraine's President Zelensky left empty-handed. Once again, the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán blocked a €90 billion loan for Ukraine, holding up the deal over an oil dispute between Budapest and Kiev. EU Council President Costa was fuming. Leaders also discussed the spike in energy prices due to the ongoing escalation in the Middle East and the blockage of the Strait of Hormuz, but repeated that this is not Europe's war. But speaking on Euronews' special EU summit show, Trump's former security advisor, John Bolton, begged to differ.
This is Europe's war. And to say, as some European leaders have, that it's not Europe's war is simply an invitation to Donald Trump to say, OK, fine, it's not Europe's war. And, Ukraine, it's not America's war.
For more, we can bring in our correspondent Shona Murray, who's been following every twist and turn of the long EU summit for us. Good morning, Shona. So John Bolton there saying this is Europe's war. EU leaders say it's not. Who's right?
Well, two things can be true at the same time, Maeve. I think EU leaders can objectively say that this isn't actually their war. They weren't consulted. They're not party to the conflict. They're not sending military assets to intervene on either side. They're calling for de-escalation. In fact, some of them extol the virtues of this potential war if it were to take out the tyrannical regime in Tehran. But at the same time, Europe has to deal with this war, potentially migratory routes towards Europe, and also, moreover, the implications being the skyrocketing gas and oil prices that are definitely hitting the European economy. So problematically, it is Europe's war. Now, yesterday we heard some European leaders, including Japan, say that they'll try to chart a way forward to securing the Strait of Hormuz, potentially diplomatically, because they ruled out sending any sort of military mission. In addition, John Bolton is also right, because if Europe decides to, let's say, condemn or criticise Donald Trump for this war and the impact it's having on them, he may decide, well, I won't be selling any more weapons to Ukraine and I won't be supporting Ukraine from a military intelligence perspective. So they have to tread carefully. Maeve?
And Shona, yet another summit overshadowed by a Hungarian veto, and President Costa we could see visibly furious. Fill us in.
Well, we've been here before, Viktor Orbán. He's been in power for 16 years and he has blocked things at EU Council level before. But this was the most confrontational and angry I've ever seen sort of EU leaders. Afterwards, people like the Swedish Prime Minister saying that this was full of anger, that the clashes were very bad. We had Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, saying that Orbán was violating the very foundational principles of cooperation at EU level. Bart de Wever, the Belgian Prime Minister, also making the point that he can't believe that Viktor Orbán endorsed this loan before Christmas and now he's not going to execute it. As we know, the whole idea is that Viktor Orbán is saying he's blocking €90 billion for Ukraine unless the Druzhba pipeline passaging Russian oil to Slovakia-Hungary is fixed. So last night, Antonio Costa, the President of the European Council, was asked about this by our own colleague Jorge, and he responded in very strong terms, essentially accusing Orbán of blackmail.
The leaders take the floor to clearly condemn the attitude from Viktor Orbán, to remember that once a deal is a deal, and all the leaders need to honour their word. And nobody can blackmail the European Council, nobody can blackmail the European Union institutions.
Antonio Costa, President of the European Council there, making the point that there has to be some sort of resolution to this. But at the same time, Maeve, Viktor Orbán has successfully blocked this loan. There's a consensus also, Maeve, that he's in the middle of an election cycle, a general election, and he's using this as a sort of a soapbox to speak to the Hungarian voters back home that he's a sort of a strong man that has huge control at EU level. And in that way, he'd be right. Maeve?
Well, indeed, those elections, Shona, taking place on the 12th of April. What's at stake here?
Well, for Viktor Orbán, lots at stake for European Union, lots at stake, and particularly for Ukraine, because Viktor Orbán has made it his business to block not just the €90 billion loan, but he's also blocking the passage of the Ukraine becoming a member of the European Union. He spoke to our Europe Today editor, Maria Tadeo, last night, and he accused the European Union of actually meddling in the Hungarian elections, saying that they're trying to push, that there's an actual policy to push him out of government. Now, remember, he is trailing in the polls, and the opposition leader, Peter Major, is doing very well in the rural constituencies, which are key for Viktor Orbán. But take a listen to that conversation last night.
Here in Brussels, many of them, especially EPP, think that the only way out of this situation is that the national government lose the election and the pro-Ukrainian government will be formed. This here is not just a hope, it's a program, may I say. Even they finance the Hungarian opposition from here.
Is Ursula von der Leyen, you say they have a program. Who is the program? And would you argue Ursula von der Leyen wants you out of government?
All the European institutions, including parties and the Commission, would like to have a change in Hungary of the government, and they finance it, yes.
Viktor Orbán there speaking to our Maria Tadeo, and before that, of course, Euronews' Shona Murray giving a very comprehensive update on that EU summit last night. And of course, President Volodymyr Zelensky also joined those talks via video link to discuss the ongoing situation in his country and the fact that his country will suffer dearly without this loan. Last month, we saw the IMF had to disburse $1.5 billion to keep the country running. For more on The View from Kiev, I'm joined here in the studio by Euronews' Ukraine correspondent, that is Sasha Vakalina. So another very tough summit for Ukraine, with Antonio Costa very, very angry, a man who's normally very mild-mannered.
Indeed, and Volodymyr Zelensky being very, very disappointed, Maeve. This was a rare occasion when Volodymyr Zelensky was not here at the Council himself in Brussels. He only connected, as you say, on the video link. This is not something that we're used to while covering the EU councils here. Apart from the €90 billion loan, there is another step that Hungary is blocking, is the new package of sanctions against Russia. So all of that, this is an impasse that we're in now. And Viktor Orbán, insisted that he's not going to move anywhere, that he's not going to change his mind or have any sort of change of heart until the moment that the oil is flowing through Druzhba, the pipeline that was damaged by the Russian attack at the end of January, and which both Ukraine and the European Union promised to fix. Let's take a listen to what Viktor Orbán had to say.
We would like to get the oil which is ours from the Ukrainians, which is now blocked by the Ukrainians. I will never support any kind of decision here which is in favor of Ukraine. Still, the Hungarians are not able to get the oil which belongs to us.
Viktor Orbán insists that the oil is blocked by Ukraine and the Ukrainians, not because of the Russian attack on the pipeline infrastructure. Now, Volodymyr Zelensky indeed was very disappointed when he addressed the leaders and also when he delivered his usual and traditional evening address. But he did insist that he hopes that the European leaders will find the solution and will find a way to unblock this loan for Ukraine. This is what he said.
We are confident that Europe will stand by us and find a way to deliver on what has already been agreed. I would like to thank every leader who stands with us on these issues, because this is a matter of protecting the lives of our people and safeguarding normality.
Volodymyr Zelensky there. And Sasha, how will Ukraine now manage without this money?
Ukraine will have to find a solution, but also the timeline is very interesting because there's not much time left. Now, Ukraine will be running out of money with this big financial hole looming in just a couple of weeks. Kyiv said that they might find the solution to stretch it a little bit, but not too much. Ukraine's finance minister spoke to Euronews as well during the summit, and this is what he said about Kyiv's way forward.
It's definitely not welcoming news from Brussels, but I think that all our counterparts and countries which support Ukraine are doing their best to secure Ukraine's financial needs for next 2 years. That's why I'm confident enough that rather sooner than later we will be able to get access for this €90 billion.
The sooner the better for Ukraine, but also for the European Union regarding delivering its promise and already the decision that has been agreed upon in December. Now, not a single decision when it comes to aid for Ukraine from the European Union is an easy one. There are always like consultations and talks and rounds of negotiations. So this is why it's specifically disappointed. Regarding the timeline, though, for Druzhba pipeline, now, it is expected to be fixed the earliest in the second half of April. Now, the question is, how much time will it take from that moment onwards for Hungary, past the elections, of course, to unblock the package and unblock that loan?
It's pretty gripping. Whatever happens, of course, we will report it. Sasha Vakalina, thank you so much for that update. Now, you might remember that this EU summit was actually meant to focus on competitiveness and boosting the European economy. An EU leaders' retreat in February had actually set the scene. EU leaders want to deepen the single market, make it easier for startups and scaling up across EU borders. In our special summit show last night, Euronews editor Maria Taddeo spoke to the former Italian Prime Minister Enrico Letta, the author of that famous paper, One Europe, One Market.
It was supposed to be the European Council for competitiveness. The European leaders, they have to intervene on both sides. Immediate interventions to lower the cost of energy today, but they have to continue working on implementing the reports on how to strengthen European economy, integrating the single market, creating this plan, One Europe, One Market, that is for the next months and next years. The main problem with Trump, is Trump is setting the agenda every day in a different way. The European leaders, they have to be very, very focused on their own agenda. That is fundamental.
So a bit of a cold shower there from Enrico Letta, reminding EU leaders that despite the fact that their summit was derailed by ongoing crisis, in a world dominated by President Trump and geopolitical competition, Europe needs to respond fast by completing the single market, which allows, of course, the free movement of goods, capital and services and people. EU leaders also dived deep into the topic of ETS. That's a huge chunk of Brussels' climate policy that aspires to make big polluters pay. If you haven't heard of ETS, our Jakub Janis has you covered.
Spring is coming to Brussels, but all your reporter hears when he goes outside is
ETS, ETS, ETS,
ETS,
ETS, ETS, ETS scheme.
And that is because 10 EU countries are in open revolt against the bloc's flagship climate policy. But hold on, what actually is the ETS? And why is there such a massive backlash against it? ETS, so emissions trading system, is essentially Europe's carbon market. And it works on a simple polluter pays principle. Heavy industries, power plants and airlines must buy allowances to cover the carbon they emit into the atmosphere. It is used for two main goals: to force companies to cut their greenhouse emissions and to push them to invest in sustainable green technologies. In the last 20 years, the ETS has slashed greenhouse gas emissions by 39% and has generated over 260 billion euros to fund clean energy. But 10 member states, including Italy, Poland and Austria, say the system is moving too fast. Italian Industry Minister Adolfo Urso even called the ETS a tax with a perverse effect, warning it prevents Europe from competing globally. And critics argue that with energy prices already soaring from the war in Iran, adding high carbon costs creates an existential risk for European businesses. And here is an example. The chemical sector alone reports that over 100 facilities have shut down, wiping out 75,000 jobs. And that is why Italy is pushing to suspend the system entirely. And the rest demand the EU extend free carbon allowances beyond 2034. Look, I know all of that sounds a bit technical, but one thing is clear. The energy transition is no longer just a climate goal. It has become a battle for European security and industrial survival.
Jakub Janis reporting for us there. And now to talk us through the dramatic summit yesterday that raises more questions now than answers, we're joined here on set by Hildegard Bentele, the senior German Conservative member of the European Parliament from the CDU party. Thank you so much for joining us. So quite a night there, pretty rough for Ukraine. What's the plan B now?
Well, for the time being, we need more consultations now. nobody expected this kind of outcome, but I think, there was the offer to inspect the pipeline, maybe, which was not, well perceived because Slovak and Hungarian participants couldn't attend. So maybe there's another attempt, to bring.
So when you say nobody expected this outcome, you mean nobody expected that veto last night from the Hungarian Prime Minister?
I think not to that extent. This is why we do not have yet a plan B, and leaders left without. And
are you furious also with Viktor Orbán the same way Antonio Costa was?
Yes, of course, but I think it's a tactic we know. So, and this is why there were some difficulties at the beginning, and this is, I think, why the President's Commission reached out, with this idea to inspect the pipeline. And as we know, it didn't went well. If it had gone well, maybe the outcome would have been different to accommodate.
Indeed, because this should have been done months ago.
Exactly.
The war in the Middle East, it's entering now its 20th day. What is the EU doing to stop it? And is this Europe's war?
Well, it's not from the beginning Europe's war, and Israel didn't ask, for EU participation. We now see the effects, the economic effects of the war, but I would also think we need some strategic patience because we are now in the third week. I expect it ongoing for 2-3 more weeks. But then, and this was also seen from the leaders of the Gulf, they are also very furious about Iran, and I think there will be a reshaping of the Middle East. And
do you support the war? Do you support what Israel is doing now, especially in Lebanon?
Well, supporting is said too much, but I think it's a huge. I understand the opportunity for Israel, because now to fight Hezbollah, what Lebanon leaders also want to do, the Lebanese army wants to do, it is a big opportunity to throw back Hezbollah strongly, because now they lack the support of Iran, and I think this could reshape really the relations between Lebanon and Israel, and this would bring a lot of more security to Israel, which was the problem all the time.
But are you concerned that 1 million people now are displaced in Lebanon?
Sure. I mean, the war always brings displaced people with it, but we also have to remind that there are thousands of displaced Israelis in the north of Israel, because they were attacked constantly for the last 2 years from Hezbollah. So Hezbollah took the opportunity after the attack of Hamas to attack also Israel very strongly. So this is an escalation which took place over the last 2 years. And I do understand that's a whole concept. It's not only throwing back Iran's nuclear and ballistic missiles, but also the immediate threat through terror organizations which aggress Israel every day.
And another big topic this week, your party celebrated 50 years with a big celebration that was overshadowed by the big scandal facing Manfred Weber, your boss, for working very closely with the far right. Should Manfred Weber resign, do you think?
Oh, no. No, of course not. But we should have a very clear line regarding the ESN, because this is mainly constituted of AfD members. So we have a very clear strategy not to work with them, and we should not do this on any levels. If it's
But he
true,
did it.
Yeah, but he said also it's not needed in numbers and it's not needed in content. And we should be very clear about that and show that they are not needed and have no influence on our policies.
And apart from the WhatsApp group, is there more encounters taking place with the AfD? Dinners, lunches?
Not that I know, and I think I'm one of those who, is very much asking for a very, very strict line. And I think we will discuss this in the next group meeting, and I'll be a strong supporter of keeping this very clear red line. And I think it should also be acceptable for other members.
But it just finally did it dampen the mood at the big party this week?
Well, I mean, it's a very German issue. I think it was not reported on, in other countries. So maybe that's...
Well, it's being reported here on Euronews Live to the world. Ms. Bente, thank you so much for coming into us here on Europe Today on Euronews. Take care. And that, of course, brings this edition of Europe Today to an end. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can read more about any of the stories we're covering and, of course, more in-depth analysis on that EU summit on euronews.com. Thanks again for tuning in. Take care and see you soon on Euronews.